Good afternoon. Again, I'm Wanda. I'm the director of the Office of Community Justice. And so with our time left, I want to just talk about what the intersection of working with our university partners, what collaborations look like on the ground, how law enforcement, how community partners come together to do some of the work that the Attorney General thinks is very important to the state of New Jersey and that we are pushing forward. One of the things that I'd like to start with is the whole notion, of course, the Marshal talked a little bit about the warrants, and so you know that we did launch fugitive state surrender and tried to pull all the partners together to move that forward. But in that, we were able to come to the School of Criminal Justice and say, help us think about what we're doing. You know, help us track the work that we're doing, help us keep some sense of how we can do it better, how can we improve, what real results happen as a result of us moving into the community, setting up an instance like fugitive safe surrender and trying to help community members. One of the other pieces that is really important to this work is looking at the county level. I had a chance to talk to the commissioner early on when he came on board. He said, you know, if you want to stop this whole recidivism and correctional piece and the money that we're spending, stop sending them. He said, just stop sending them. And so when you think about that, you want to think about how do you get in front of that? How do you actually work around that? And so one of the things that the Attorney General was able to do last year was to release for the first time in history a RFP that was focusing on county jails. A few of our partners are here, thank you, from the county jails. So we were able to do that. And what we were looking at were transitional plans. We wanted to make sure that folks who were coming in and out, and in and out, and in and out again, at the county jail level, we're getting the right services that they need. How are we connecting them to care? How are we moving them from jail into community? And then monitoring that so we have a continuum of care. So we were able, again, with Rutgers help, to really look at that. How do we collect data? You know, a lot of this information and bringing evidence really is determined by the amount of data that we can collect and how good is that data we collect. So we were able to come back again to Rutgers and say, could you help us do this? And how can we collect this data, and what's the best way to do it, and how do jails do what they do, and then how can we help them so that they're better. We also had the chance to look at what was happening on the prevention side, and I'll tell you how that happened. As the reentry person and really looking at policy, the gentleman who was doing the most of our prevention efforts decided he was going back be a little closer to his family, had a great offer, and so I sat down with the general. She said, you know, I know you're working on that reentry, but without Mr. Drury here, you're going to have to also do prevention. Don't worry, I'm sure you can do that well too. Let's just go ahead and do it. So that's how the Office of Community Justice, quite frankly, was really boiled down to looking across the spectrum so that we were able to look at reentry, look at law enforcement, but also look at prevention. And so I inherited about 18 months ago the entire prevention portfolio. And so I got a chance to really look at what was happening and look at what was happening across New Jersey, what was happening in communities, what were some of the initiatives that we were working on, and quite frankly at that point I also had to make them happen. So I jumped into that, and so in a few instances I think we've been able to really take a close look at what's happening, working with our university partners, and so I wanted to share with you a little bit about that. But I want to preface this by saying, you know, usually when we go out and we talk about reentry do work, one of the things that comes back to me all the time is, well, you know, that's great work that you do on the adult side, but what about the youth? What about juveniles? Everybody's talking about adults, nobody's focusing on juveniles. You gotta focus on juveniles. So whether it's Bob Mercado back there, or Lynn Lucas, or Lori, saying, listen, what are you doing about youth, and what is your focus? So this is what we began to do after we took a close look at the portfolio and began to put all the pieces together. In the beginning of the year, we were able to put together a series of youth development forums because I really wanted to hear from practitioners. I wanted to hear what was happening on the ground, what were people saying, how were people getting connected, what was important to families, what was important to youth. So again, with the school's help, both the law school here and the School of Criminal Justice, and with Dean Clear's support, we were able to put together a series of forums to talk about issues. And we talked about aging out youth from foster care. We talk about transition. We talk about them being homeless. We talked about young people on the streets and their interaction with police. We talked about the role of diapers and how can we come together. We looked at all these issues with both youth and with practitioners and policymakers to figure out what was going on. As a result of those many forums, we were able to put together a series of conference calls that happened the entire summer. We just did it recently. It included the Juvenile Justice Commission, Youth Service Commission, some of your county level people. We looked at labor, we had education, we had everybody on this call trying to figure out what then we do next. What's the next step and how do we bring this together? And so with the help of the Blaustein School of Planning and Public Policy, one of the things that we've been able to look at is establishing a shared youth vision. You know, taking folks out of their silos to put together this really robust, comprehensive way of working with youth. So we've been able to bring everybody to the table, talk about what the issues that are important to them, and of course for each agency that's different. We're trying to understand the difference among language, the terms that are used. If you say assessment, what does that mean? If I say assessment, what does that mean? You know, what is the difference between parole and probation? In some instances, because we had started, you know, understanding systems one-on-one. Really looking at what it is that each system is designed to do and what actually are they doing. And so as we move the prevention side of the house forward, a couple of things were very important to us, and one was the Youth Build program. So we were able to get behind Youth Build. And how many have heard of Youth Build? Anybody heard of Youth Build? So you know that that is this combination of working with young people, many of whom have been in both foster care and our criminal justice or juvenile justice systems, to actually get them the support, the educational support they need, but also to get them the training that they need around skills, so whether it's construction or electrical engineering, those kinds of things. So we've been able to add to the portfolio of youth build programs another actually four more programs, so that we're extending our whole rollout into the community and to really look at kids who are at risk and working through our youth build programs. One of the other programs that were really important to us to take a look at is something called the Harlem Children's Zone. We had the opportunity to meet with Jeffrey Kavanaugh to talk about what they were doing and how they were making such inroads in the community and making changes in that community. And so we were able to engage them, and I'm happy to say that New Jersey is the only state that has decided to roll out its own Harlem Children's Zone model, something we call Promised Communities, much like the federal model of Promised Neighborhoods. But we have engaged, and we are also supporting both Camden, in Camden, the Center for Family Services, and here in Newark, La Casa de Don Pedro is our site of the Harlem Children's Zone project. And so we're delighted to work with communities, focusing in schools, but understanding that schools aren't the end of everything, that communities have to be there to support the youth that are attending the schools and working with those families. One other initiative that we've been working with, it really kind of pulls together all the elements that we discussed here today: data, evidence, collaboration, community, law enforcement partnerships, university inputs, our municipal planning boards. So we decided that one of the ways that we had to get into communities was to look at the crime data, figure out where there were trouble across the state, and began to target our resources. And so we went into 5 different communities, and we actually have these planning boards that were all developed based on data. So the planning boards bring together a series of stakeholders, so from your social service people to folks in the county, to juvenile parole, probation, the courts, law enforcement, and we all sit together. And with the help of our educational partners, and in this regard, we have a couple of wonderful partnerships with the College of New Jersey, again with the Walter Rand Institute at Rutgers, and the Blaustein School. And so the university partnership has been critical to us, to understanding what we're doing, how we're doing, and looking at the data. So we've convened these groups in Vineland, in Asbury Park, in Trenton, Newark, and Camden. And we're talking to the stakeholders around what can we do to wrap ourselves around the youth. So for example, when we began the board in Trenton, we began to look at data, and everybody begins with a data walk. We don't do anything unless we understand what the issues are. And many will say, oh, we know what the issues are, we know what the young people need, but not so. So when we started in Trenton, we began to take a snapshot at a time to look at what was happening, where was the violence, where was the crime, we found that the #1 cause for homicide in Trenton at the time we did the snapshot was domestic violence. Very different belief than most people would think, that it was not the young people killing each other, was it? It was domestic violence. And for us, and having our meetings at the police station and trying to figure out how do you get involved in something like that? Because usually when the call happens, it's usually too late. But how do you insert yourself, understanding that that is the #1 cause of homicide, is domestic violence? So what we decided to do was just to step back and start engaging our domestic violence partners. We knew we needed to get into schools. We knew we needed to get ourselves around young people. We know we need to make that transition, get people to understand that they are valuable, understand around self-esteem, understand that if he hits you, that doesn't mean he loves you. And if she hits you, that doesn't mean she loves you. Right, so we had to start talking about all of those very complicated issues and inserting ourselves in such a way that we could interrupt the cycle. In addition, because we were at the police station, we were able to work with DV Stat, in which we were collecting data around the incidents of domestic violence. But in addition to the DV Stat, what we said is we need to figure out, are there kids present at the time this incident occurred, so that we could begin to intervene, because we understood from the incidents and the data in previous incidents in the data that unless you interrupt that cycle, it was much more likely that you were going to have this pattern reoccur. So if you wanted to interrupt the cycle of violence, you had to get in there with the children. So we are collecting data across our boards around those domestic violence incidents in which children are present, and figuring out a way how to structure ourselves and how to get there. And much like the constitutional issues that you get around tracking people across time, same thing when you're trying to track somebody who's been the witness of domestic violence. Do you just run in and get there and pull them out of class and say, I understand that mommy and daddy had a fight last night? No. So you have to be really creative around how do you get to that kid or that young person and the support that we give that family, the support that they need. So through our planning boards, we've been able to really pull together what we think are the critical issues in those communities. They are defined by those communities. The solutions are defined also by those same communities, and each one is different. And they all have decided on different priorities. One of the things about the College of New Jersey and the way we've taken this to the next level through Patrick Donahue's Honor Center is that he's actually engaged the faculty now to help us on our subcommittees. So if it's our subcommittee around juvenile crime and delinquency, then we're going to talk to the professor who can come in and tell us how to think about this, how to support us, and stuff, and how to kind of move all of this forward so that we're actually thinking about what we're doing actually on the ground, using data and evidence that we have and the research we have at the same time, and pulling them all together so that we could be smart about what we're doing and hopefully making it